we would invoke the United Nations Charter of Human Rights, and one of those fundamental human rights, and it is under clause 1.2 of the United Nations Charter, and that is the right of all peoples, all nations, to self-determination, the right to choose the future of their own country and the sovereignty of that country. Now, the people of Scotland have already got the sovereignty sewn up. It's all part of our constitutional right. And this right to self-determination in Scotland is known as the claim of right. And that is the right of all Scots to decide who governs them and from where that government is located. It only takes the government of Scotland to declare that a vote in majority for, let's say, the SNP, for example, in any future general election of any kind, if it exceeds 50% of the popular vote, that is the trigger for Scotland to declare the Union at an end, because the people have spoken. And that's what democracy is. But it's not British democracy that we're talking about. This is international law that we're applying, and I've not heard any political leader from any party at all in favour of independence ever mention endorsing or applying the principles of international law and the law of self-determination to voting for what we know as independence, but what is actually the ending of the Union Treaty. So no matter which of the candidates wins this leadership race, the one candidate who actually mentions the fact that we have the right to self-determination and says and states quite categorically that any new general election or referendum in which the question is asked, do you wish Scotland to remain in a union with England, and if the answer is no in majority, then that is the end of it. But that particular leader needs to articulate that absolutely exactly, almost word for word, that that is what will happen. Frankly, we're not hearing that from either Kate Forbes or from Humza Yousaf. Now, it's well known that both Humza Yousaf and Kate Forbes were mentioned by Nicola Sturgeon while she was still First Minister as potential successors to her, although she shied clear of actually ever recommending a successor or grooming, if you'll pardon the expression, a new successor, in the same way that Nicola Sturgeon was prepared and sort of crowned as the new First Minister when Alex Salmond resigned, and the new SNP leader, I should say. So this is not a coronation anymore. This is not a succession from Nicola Sturgeon to one of her chosen acolytes or trainees or whatever. This has to be a leader who is prepared to invoke international law and the right to self-determination, and to say so. Ash Regan, to my mind at least, is the one leader, the one potential leader of the SNP so far who's come closest to actually saying it. And what she's said is that she would act if there was a majority voting for the SNP where that first pledge in the manifesto was independence if there's a majority of votes. She's the only one who's even hinted that this is what she would do. Now, it's a small step for a politician like Ash Regan to take, to go from that point to say that at that point, when we have that majority, even if it's 50.2% or something like that of the votes, then she will invoke our international right to self-determination and seek the recognition of the international community for Scotland to declare its union with England over. We're not seceding, we're not leaving the country because we're not in a country. We're simply ending a treaty with our next door neighbours. Anybody who says we're like Spain is lying to you. Scotland is not Spain. We're not part of a country. We are part of a union of two countries held in place by a simple treaty. And that treaty can be ended by either side at any time when they have a democratic event in which the majority of their people vote to end it. And really that is as simply as I can put this. So what is important now is for any SNP members who are thinking about how they're going to vote in the coming weeks, for them to consider which of the candidates is most likely to do what I've just described. Because anything short of that is what some people have characterised as dangling carrots. Independence is is not something that we need to work for. Independence is something that we need to vote for. And it's not a panacea to everything. It is just becoming normal, restoring Scotland back to what it was before the Union, which is an independent country which has its own government, has its own policies, is in full control of all of its resources and all of its financial assets and all of its fixed assets. And that is the natural state of all countries, including Scotland. We are not exceptional. We are not some bizarre weirdo country that exists in some kind of bubble in which we can't escape. We are simply a country that has a treaty with another. All we have to do is vote to end that treaty, and that's it, finished. And as long as we focus on that task, never mind trying to get 60% of Scots in English polls, in English newspapers to say that they want independence. That's immaterial. What matters is how people vote in a general election, because that's the only legal and lawful and basically unstoppable democratic event that is left open to us. And in that respect, Ash Regan is quite right. All the other doors and opportunities for democratic access have been closed. The only thing left is a general election, and the best way, I think, still to do that is for this to be a Scottish general election, because it is only Scotland which needs to make this decision, and it's the people of Scotland who need to decide whether they want this union to continue or not. Remember that Northern Ireland has now got what it wanted. They voted against Brexit. They voted to stay in the European Union, and thanks to Rishi Sunak and Ursula von der Leyen, they've now got their wish. But Scotland is not allowed to do that because England says so. Now that's not right, because we voted very heavily against Brexit, much more than any other part of the UK. So the only way we can actually get out of this and undo the damage of Brexit would be to end the treaty with England and free ourselves from this enormous millstone of Brexit, which is causing so much damage to our country. So that's my pitch for today. For those of you considering how you're going to vote, remember that what's really important here is ending the Union. What happens after that, how good Scotland becomes after that, is up to us. But what's important is ending the Union. And unless we repudiate the Union as a people and say we are not happy anymore, we don't want this Union, we want it over, we want it ended, and we're instructing our Scottish Parliament to end the Union, and that has to be very explicit in the voting, then we can't get out. It's the only way we can get out. And all other considerations, gender politics, hate crime, child benefits, extra free school meals, all these little inducements that other candidates are offering are sideshows. None of it can happen while we're chained to the UK. At best, we can put sticking plasters over the gaping wounds caused by the United Kingdom's cutting of our funding. So the only way out of all of this is to end the Union, and that is what we must vote for. So let's focus our attention on that. Let's ask those difficult questions of those three candidates. Now, I'm not a member of the SNP, I have no vote. I have my own opinion about who I think is probably moving in the right direction. And for me, that would be Ash Regan. Despite her inexperience, she has been guided by the wise head of Joanna Cherry, and I would trust Joanna Cherry because she is a fantastic legal mind, and people forget that she was the one who prevented Boris Johnson from proroguing Parliament, and in fact stymied the whole thing and went to the Queen about it as well. So Joanna Cherry, despite any political infighting within the SNP, knows what she's talking about, and if she is mentoring Ash Regan, then to me that is a sign that Ash Regan is probably the person that I would vote for if I were in the SNP, which of course I'm not. So that's it from me today. Have a think about it. Consider what the other candidates say in the next few weeks when they actually engage in some kind of debate. But I'd be willing to bet you a large sum of money that neither Kate Forbes nor Hamza Yusuf mentions anything about either the claim of right or the right to self-determination under international law, or using it, or finding a way to get to that point. I'd be interested to see if I'm wrong. I am delighted to be proven wrong if I am wrong, so if I am wrong, then I'll hold my hands up to it. But right at this moment, it looks to me like Ash Regan is the closest at the moment to doing what's actually needed. Anyway, I'll see you soon. It's food for thought. Keep the faith, but remember, put pressure on your own politicians and think very carefully before you choose the next leader of the SNP. Is that leader going to action the cause of independence by going directly to ask the people whether they want the union to continue or not? Because that's really all it boils down to. Should the union continue, or should we end it and free ourselves from its shackles forever? That's it. I'll leave you with that thought. Bye for now.